Life aboard the SpaceX Starship won't be the luxurious sci-fi fantasy many people imagine. This massive next-generation rocket may one day carry us from Earth to Mars, but the journey will be long, cramped, uncomfortable, and far more challenging than anyone expects. Between recycled water, tight living quarters, and months of isolation in deep space, only the strongest crews will endure. So if humanity is truly preparing to live inside Starship, what will that experience really be like? When SpaceX first revealed the earliest concepts of Starship, the vision felt almost utopian. A towering 50-meter spacecraft where the entire upper half, spacious, open, and wrapped in giant panoramic windows, would serve as a combined home and transport system for crews heading toward Mars. Over 1,000 cubic meters of open-concept living space, wide decks, clean, minimalist interiors. A Starship that looked like the perfect fusion of technology and comfort. But reality had other plans. As SpaceX began flight testing its early Starship prototypes, everything changed. The belly flop landings, the rapid unscheduled disassemblies, the failures, explosions, and brutal trial and error process revealed a harsh truth. The beautiful open interior wasn't practical. Stability, safety, and engineering constraints would reshape the vessel more than aesthetics ever could. One of the first major changes was the relocation of the landing fuel tanks. Originally placed at the bottom of the rocket, engineers discovered that during the flip maneuver, the moment the rocket swings around like a pendulum during descent, fuel sloshing at the lower end created dangerous instability. So SpaceX made a bold redesign choice, move the landing fuel tanks all the way up into the nose cone. The solution worked brilliantly for flight, but it came at a cost. The entire pointy section at the top, once imagined as a luxurious viewing deck, instantly became off-limits for crew. No big panoramic window, no observation lounge, no cinematic view of Mars rising over the horizon. And the changes didn't stop there. As Starship graduated from short hops to full orbital flights, SpaceX encountered a new challenge. Starship needed more propellant than expected to reach orbit while carrying meaningful payloads. The answer? A larger rocket. In 2025, SpaceX introduced the Starship V2, bigger on the outside by about 2 meters, yet somehow smaller on the inside. The reason? Fuel tanks were expanded upward, cutting into the livable volume. The result was a payload section reduced from 1,000 cubic meters to roughly 500 cubic meters of usable crew space. Half the dream, but still enough to attempt a journey no human has ever taken. To put that into perspective, the International Space Station has around 900 cubic meters of pressurized volume, and at times it has hosted up to 13 people. So technically, 500 cubic meters could sustain a small crew. But a trip to Mars isn't a weekend stay. NASA's research indicates that for a 2.5-year round trip, humans require around 25 cubic meters of shared space per person. Not personal space, just general livable volume. By that calculation, Starship V2 maxes out around 20 people before psychological strain becomes a real threat. And that's before considering that crewed Starship interiors must include life support systems, storage decks, an airlock, cargo modules, ladders, partitions, and structural reinforcements. In other words, the sleek sci-fi Starship we once imagined is evolving into something more practical, less glamorous, but far more capable. And the journey toward Mars is only getting more complex. Now that we understand how the Starship evolved into the more compact and utilitarian version we have today, the obvious question becomes, how much space is actually left for the people making the journey to Mars? because no matter how ambitious SpaceX's vision is, the reality is that deep space travel demands compromises that won't always be comfortable or glamorous. Starship V2 leaves us with around 500 cubic meters of livable space. That's half of the original design, but it's still a surprisingly large interior when compared to other spacecraft. For context, the International Space Station provides about 900 cubic meters. Yet the ISS is a labyrinth of narrow corridors, tight modules, and cluttered equipment tucked into every corner. It feels big on paper, but astronauts describe it as a maze of floating tunnels rather than an open living area. And despite this limited environment, it permanently houses 7 people, with peaks reaching as high as 13. So, does this mean Starship could comfortably carry a dozen or more travelers to Mars? Not exactly, because livable volume is not the same as usable volume. The ISS is heavily optimized through decades of iteration. Starship, meanwhile, must balance crew needs with cargo capacity, life support equipment, internal structure, fuel tank placement, and mass constraints that grow exponentially harsher the farther you travel from Earth. To help answer this, we turn to NASA. In 2013, long before Starship ever existed, NASA commissioned a detailed study on psychological sustainability during multi-year spaceflight. Their conclusion: for a Mars mission lasting roughly 2.5 years, each crew member requires about 25 cubic meters of general shared space. Not private cabins, not personal comfort zones, just the minimum environmental volume to remain mentally stable and avoid the risk of severe psychological stress. Using that metric, Starship V2 tops out at 20 people, and that assumes ideal conditions. But reality slices into that number very quickly. A real crewed Starship needs internal floors, walls, ladders, storage compartments, and structural supports. Then the entire lower deck must be reserved for the airlock and cargo bay, because explorers will need to descend to the Martian surface with tools, equipment, rovers, and scientific instruments. All of that consumes precious volume long before a single crew member even steps inside. The moment you begin dividing the interior into levels, rooms and functional zones, sleeping quarters, medical space, gym equipment, hygiene pods, waste storage, water recycling, it becomes clear that those theoretical 500 cubic meters shrink fast. The result is something far more cramped, especially during the months-long outbound voyage where no one can escape the environment. So, is this the limit? Will Starship always feel like a slightly larger version of a submarine? Not necessarily. This is where Starship Phi-3, the long variant, enters the picture. Starship Phi-3 extends the ship's length to 69 meters, adding an extra 17 meters over V2. That sounds like a massive boost in space, but remember, bigger rockets need bigger fuel tanks. Much of the new length is consumed by propellant storage, not crew areas. Still, even with these constraints, V3 is expected to restore something close to the original vision, bringing the internal volume back toward 1,000 cubic meters. That's double what V2 offers. And that shift changes everything. Suddenly, the idea of transporting larger crews becomes more realistic. Suddenly, missions begin to resemble early colony expeditions rather than cramped test flights. SpaceX didn't abandon the dream, they simply had to reach it through a series of engineering compromises. Now that we have a clearer sense of the available space, the next question is, how do you turn a giant stainless steel cylinder into a functional home for months or years in deep space? That's where things get interesting. Now that we finally understand how much space we have, it's time to design the inside of the Starship, deck by deck. because this vessel must serve as a home, a workplace, a laboratory, a gym, and a life support system all in one. And the layout begins exactly where the crew would first interact with the surface of Mars, the lower level. Deck 1 is the airlock and cargo bay, the gateway between the crew and the hostile environment outside. Fortunately, SpaceX has already shown what this section might look like through its Starship lunar lander design. Astronauts descend from above into a circular airlock lined with EVA suits. Stepping into those suits is the first ritual before any surface expedition. Beyond the airlock lies the unpressurized cargo hold, packed with scientific instruments, cameras, mobility devices, and all the tools explorers will need. An industrial cage-like elevator will carry them slowly and safely down to the Martian ground. Deck 2 becomes the primary storage and life support hub. This is where the ship's heaviest systems must be kept. Water tanks, oxygen reserves, vac machinery, food stores, and long-duration waste storage. Mass must stay low to maintain a stable center of gravity during descent, so every kilogram matters. This deck is all function, no comfort. Climbing into Deck 3, necessity meets reality. Here we find the hygiene modules, toilets, washing stations, and the most crucial and least glamorous system aboard the ship: water recycling. Without recycling, 10 people would need 27 metric tons of water for a round trip to Mars. With recycling, that number drops to just 3. As on the ISS, urine will be purified into drinking water, solid waste will be dehydrated and stored, and every gram of moisture will be recovered. Space travel is not glamorous. It is survival. Yet even on this deck, there must be room for a compact gym. Astronauts require 2 hours of daily exercise, cardio, and resistance just to prevent severe muscle and bone loss over the months-long journey. Expect treadmills with harnesses, stationary bikes, and a specialized full-body resistance machine. Above this lies the heart of human life aboard Starship, the crew deck. But that deserves an entire section of its own, because once you enter the living quarters, everything changes. As we move beyond the functional decks and into the upper levels of Starship, we finally reached the part of the ship that feels the most human: the living quarters. Deck 4 becomes the primary crew cabin space, and what happens here determines whether the journey to Mars feels tolerable or unbearable. Let's start with the basics. If we take the roughly 1,000 cubic meters of Starship Phi-3 and subtract floors, walls, storage, equipment, and the first 2 levels dedicated to airlock and heavy systems, we're left with something around 600 cubic meters for actual human habitation. For many people, that's still hard to visualize. So imagine a fairly large home, 3 or 4 bedrooms, sizable living areas, about 2,300 square feet, not tiny, not expansive, just livable. But this home will hold 20 people. NASA's psychological models support that number, and interestingly, so does SpaceX's internal design language. According to people who have seen Starship mock-ups, SpaceX is developing modular rectangular bunk pods, the same style used in the lunar lander. They're stackable, efficient, and arranged around the circular interior walls to maximize space. Early renderings suggest a single deck could fit 20 beds, not luxurious suites, more like elegant coffins with lights, ventilation, and privacy panels. Enough for rest, enough for sanity, enough to survive. Moving upward brings us to Deck 5, the heart of community life, the mess hall. No stove, no oven. Cooking in space is dramatically different. Food arrives dehydrated and vacuum-packed. Preparing a meal means injecting hot water into a bag and waiting for it to rehydrate. It isn't glamorous, but astronauts on the ISS have proven it can still be enjoyable. They even get pizza nights. Still, SpaceX might have something more ambitious in mind. NASA is experimenting with hydroponics in microgravity, and early results suggest leafy greens may grow well in space. It's possible the Starship mess hall will include a compact greenhouse module, not enough to feed the crew, but enough to offer fresh lettuce or herbs. A small luxury, a taste of Earth light years away. Then comes Deck 6, the psychological escape hatch, the lounge. This is where wide open spaces matter most. After months in confinement, the human mind craves visual relief. Here, the ship's 9-meter width becomes the canvas for a more spacious environment. Big screens, open seating, maybe a communal table, or a small gallery wall with artwork. But the real prize would be windows, large reinforced panels offering views of deep space, solar glare, or the distant red dot of Mars growing closer each day. But there's a catch. Floating in microgravity is freeing until it isn't. Once Starship lands on Mars, gravity returns, meaning every piece of furniture, chairs, couches, tables, must be bolted down, secured, or engineered to function in both environments. A lounge that works in zero gravity must also work under Martian gravity. A dual-purpose design challenge. Above that, on Deck 7, lies the workspace. Offices, research stations, communication consoles, and perhaps even small personal work pods for crew members. 3 years away from Earth is a long time to be idle, and a bored crew is a dangerous crew. The workspace becomes the mental stabilizer, offering tasks, goals, and structure. Productivity becomes psychological survival. And finally, at the top of the habitable zone, we reach Deck 8, the command deck. This is where the crew straps in for launch and landing. Its position high in the ship minimizes the sloshing forces during the iconic flip maneuver. During descent, Starship swings like a pendulum, and the nose cone remains the most stable place inside the vessel. Up here, the flight controls, navigation systems, and communication arrays define the nerve center of the mission. Once the landing legs touch Martian soil, Starship doesn't retire. It becomes a home, a base, and a shelter for the duration of the crew's stay. Until habitats are built, until pressurized rovers expand the frontier, until Elon's dream of a Martian city begins to materialize, Starship remains everything: a rocket, a home, a lifeline. And for the crew who make the journey, these levels will define not just how they live, but who they become. After months drifting through the void, exercising in cramped gyms, recycling every drop of water, eating rehydrated meals, and sleeping in compact bunk pods, the crew finally approaches their destination: Mars. A dusty, frozen, hostile world that has captured humanity's imagination for generations. And as Starship begins its descent, everything learned aboard the ship suddenly matters. Every deck, every system, every compromise. The crew straps into their seats on Deck 8, the flight deck, positioned high enough to remain stable during the notorious landing flip. Outside, the atmosphere of Mars tears against the heat shield as the ship plunges downward. Raptor engines ignite. Dust erupts across the landing zone. Starship rights itself. And then, impact. A controlled, historic, gentle impact. The crew has officially arrived on another world, but stepping onto the Martian surface doesn't mean leaving Starship behind. Far from it. This vessel becomes their home, shelter, and primary habitat for months, possibly even years. Those 1,000 cubic meters of meticulously organized interior space now function as a life support capsule on alien soil. Deck 1 becomes the gateway to exploration. Suits are donned, samples are collected, rovers are deployed. Deck 2 sustains life with water, food, and oxygen systems running non-stop. Deck 3 handles hygiene and waste. Still the most unpleasant but essential part of survival. Deck 4 shelters the crew's beds, their only real haven from the psychological strain of planetary isolation. Deck 5 serves as the mess hall, where shared meals become shared morale. Deck 6 becomes the emotional refuge, the place where the crew gathers during red sunsets or dust storms. Deck 7 keeps minds occupied with research, mission planning, and communication with Earth. And Deck 8 remains the operational heart, the place where future missions will be coordinated. Until permanent habitats are constructed, Starship is everything. Elon Musk often talks about sending 100 people to Mars in a single flight. Technically, Starship could do it, but realistically, that many humans packed inside for months would be a humanitarian nightmare. The competitor's script illustrated this with brutal clarity, and it's true. For long-duration spaceflight, 20 people is the practical upper limit for both sanity and safety. But the long-term goal of Starship was never to take one perfect trip. It was to take thousands, to deliver crews, cargo, habitats, power systems, food production units, and infrastructure to transform a cold desert into a thriving frontier. And while the interior of Starship may not be the sci-fi palace we once imagined, it is built for one purpose: to carry humanity into a new era. Inside this stainless steel giant, people will laugh, struggle, work, explore, and dream. They will endure discomfort, they will face fear, but they will also experience something no generation before them ever has: the feeling of stepping onto another world and knowing they helped build the beginning of a second home for humanity. The Starship is not luxury, it is not comfort, it is not ease. It is the first real bridge between worlds. If this journey aboard the SpaceX Starship fascinated you, imagine what humanity will accomplish once the first settlers actually touch down on Mars. The future is unfolding faster than anyone expected, and we're just getting started. Subscribe and join us as we explore the next great leap into the unknown.